Remnants of a Forgotten Past by Alban 55, Chapter 12, Tremaine Fall. Things were downtrodden at the campfire that night, with just the two of them. Arslan just sat there on the other side of Naruto, sniffling every few minutes with her head in her hands. They were camped out outside the ruined village, its crumbling walls a stark reminder in the background of what had just transpired. Naruto hardly looked well either, like a piece of himself was gone. All the faunas in his custody were dead, and those he had personally freed and promised that he would get food and medical attention for, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had always said he would never go back on his word, so what now? He had let them all die. Did that mean his entire worldview was a farce? That at least in this instance, he stared at the licking flames forlornly, occasionally stoking it or stealing a glance up at Arslan. At least above all else, he had managed to keep her alive, but she was looking worse for wear. Now to suppose that she really did care about Phyllis despite everything. Just going to the town left him with so much to think about. The campsite was looking lonely with just him and Arslan, with no other bodies strewn out all over the place. He could despair about the dead faunas and also contemplate what Han had told him, but he supposed he had more reason than ever to head to Mistral than ever before, more than getting Neptune enrolled in a school and getting Arslan to safety. If only Han had told him who this other person he was supposed to be looking for was. He assumed that they were jinchuriki, whoever they were, judging by Han's cryptic words about the subject. Only thing to do now was rendezvous with Neptune, and they couldn't be out here too long lest they attract too many Grimm. But Naruto supposed he could allow Arslan a little more time to rest. He scooped up next to the slightly young girl. "Hey, everything's all right." What was he saying? Of course it wasn't, but Arslan seemed to catch his drift and raised her head up to show him a tear-stained face. She sniffled loudly and nodded at him. A walking grim magnet and a girl overcome by negative emotions. He wondered how long it would be before they were attacked again. Being out here had been an exercise in danger ever since he had arrived. Why hadn't he tried to get behind the kingdom's wall sooner? "Days," she wailed, and Naruto wrapped an arm around her and pulled the girl into a hug. He stroked the blonde's mane that was her hair, shushing her. She had lost so much recently, it must have felt like her entire world was crashing down, which in a sense it was. He let her cry into his shoulder for a moment, her sense of dignity lost when she was able to shield her face within a fabric. The low, muffled sobbing and the crackling fire were the only sounds in the swampy forest, but after a few minutes of crying, Arslan pulled away surprisingly abrupt. "No more!" she roared as angrily as she was depressed. It came out a cross between a wail and a croak, like her entire burden of the last few days had been entirely too much to bear, and she lashed out. "I watched my village get destroyed, my father die, and now that horrible display back there, and I wasn't able to do anything but stand there and cry or run like a scared child." Naruto stood there, stunned, as Arslan shouted and stiffened when she grabbed a handful of his shirt in her tan hands and yanked him forward in a surprising display of strength. "Naruto, take me to Mistral. You said you were going to help Neptune enroll in an academy. Help me too. I don't want to just be standing around losing everything I love anymore. Swear to me that you'll take me to Mistral and help me make a difference." She didn't outright say it, but there was something vague in her tone of voice. It wasn't hate, not even close to that emotion, but more like resentment. Did Arslan resent him? All this had happened only because he had popped up in her life. "I swear, I'll take you to Mistral." What else could he do? It was the best he could do to make things right. She must have been thinking about this in the meantime. She didn't have much left in this world. Here she was, trying to give herself a sense of purpose. It would go against everything Naruto believed in to not encourage that. Arslan went to bed that night, as satisfied as one could be in her situation, but Naruto lay awake for half the night looking out for Grimm, while at the same time thinking about the situation. He sat up in his sleeping bag in the middle of the night, looking at the form of the sleeping Arslan illuminated only by the embers of the dead fire. He pulled himself out of the bag and crept away from the campsite, but not before grabbing his weapons pouch and sneaking off into the woods. It was quiet, almost dead quiet on the foggy night. He could even hear the metal of the kunai jiggling in his pouch, but as he sat down in the middle of the forest floor, he opened the pouch and pulled out something else that was contained within. It was Otto von Claver's scroll, which he had been fiddling with the last few days in order to figure out how it worked. He had made quite a bit of headway with the technology, but the only reason he was keeping this was for one specific reason. He was still getting calls from the Fall Woman and had been mulling over whether or not she should call her back, he would have probably left it alone by now, if not for one thing. The woman had left a voicemail intended for Clover, and with it he had gleaned a bunch of information. She was the Clover Troop sponsor, a powerful woman who belonged to one of the noble families in Mistral. The way she talked in the voicemail indicated that she was a big fan of circus entertainment, and as such, she was the reason the Clover Troop was able to get off the ground so quickly, so successfully. Was she aware of Van Claver's more shady dealings? He didn't know, but as nobility, he wouldn't put it past her. But more importantly, she was a rich and elite socialite. If she was a rich and elite socialite, then perhaps she had access to the inner workings of the things that made the kingdom run, including the academies. Maybe he could sell her on the idea of two potential young huntsmen. If getting into an academy was often about who you knew, as Neptune said it was, this could be their ticket in. The figures were already working their way across the dial pad, punching in the numbers necessary in order to contact the woman. He put the device to his ear in the way he had seen Clever do, listening to the ring on the other end. It rang and rang and rang, but no one picked it up. It must have been too late in the night. God damn it, Naruto muttered to himself, putting the scroll down and closing it. What was he doing? Can't you see? You're just trying to make up for your own fuck-ups. Naruto jolted up, but there was no one there, his ninja sensing indicating that there was no one trying to sneak up on him, or that any human was in the vicinity. As he looked up, he realized that the voice was coming from his own mind, not Kyubi, just one of those little voices of guilt that popped up in that time like this. As he looked at the bark of the tree he was standing next to, an imaginary face popped into existence. That's not true, he said. Is it? Do you honestly think you can play the hero this time? You can get those two into schools? What's that going to do? You're the reason that girl has no home and family. All those people are dead because you couldn't do anything. Some hero you are, the tree mocked. Shut up! Naruto shouted angrily, fist clenched before he realized he was shouting at nothing. It was just a tree in front of him, no human face attached to it, and it certainly did not talk. Do you honestly think you could play the hero this time? This world isn't meant for you, and you aren't meant for this world. Try as you might, will always be a freak in a strange land. You think back home it was bad trying to get it accepted? You'll never get it in this place. Now the voice was just coming from inside his head. Hannah had left more of a mark than just telling him information about the situation. Hannah had been the one who had killed all those faunists, not him. But was what he said about them true? That deduction that he had made wasn't logical. The way he spoke, Han hadn't made a connection with this new world at all. No matter how much he tried to justify himself in his head, something wrong hollow after hearing that from Han. The way he wanted to live his life as a ninja was to use his power to help those in need who couldn't help themselves, if possible, find a way for them to become stronger on their own as well. The idea of his power wasn't enough, or that his carelessness had actively hurt someone was maddening to himself. He thumped his head against the tree bark that coupled with what Han represented. Could he become like him? He wanted to get home so badly, and he had nearly truly felt he was responsible, resonating with this place. The thought of living here forever was frightening. It was also the first time an event like that had happened because of his recklessness. Perhaps it was time to dial back on it and think about the situation before acting. Look underneath the underneath and all that. He wasn't sure that was exactly the way Kakashi had meant it. Would there be situations where no matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to help? He hoped not. Gar placed another glass on the rack to dry. It was his third day working in Junior's bar, a big step down compared to his previous employment as a shinobi. But the Shukaku Jinchuriki did it all without complaining, always remaining out of the light of sight from Junior and doing his job in silence. As he grew more accustomed to the place and vice versa, the henchmen he interacted with began to find him strange. It was a thankless job, but he was waiting for the day Junior told him he could start asking for information, which hadn't come yet. But Gara was about to get a boon when Junior called him out to the bar one slow night. Gara, get your ass out here, I need you. Gara didn't so much as blink at the snappy order and went out onto the bar floor to meet with his boss. He pushed open the employee's door. employees-only door, listening to it creak on its hinges before being assaulted by the neon lights of the dance floor. Junior beckoned him over to the behind the bar counter, but before Gara got there, he noticed that Junior was speaking to someone. It was a young man. He could have been anywhere from 21 to 24. He was dressed in a snappy white suit and black bowler hat in which his neon orange hair struck out in a fringe. He was twirling a cane around his fingers, clacking his boots while regarding Junior with a cocky smirk. Pretty expensive duds for a kid like you. Didn't know a common thug like you was able to afford them. Thought you were in a jail again anyway, Torchwick, Junior snarked. Got to look at the part, you know, Torchwick said, his voice betraying the absolute look of confidence to indicate that he was anything but. Yeah, but a couple of months ago, you didn't look the part. So you go from some punk with a gun and a ski mask to a fag all within the span of a couple months. Did you drop the soap one too many times and change teams or something? Junior quipped without missing a beat, and those henchmen who heard him gave a few mocking chuckles. Torchwick scowled. Believe what you want, Haijing. Haojang, he said in a voice that belayed his anger. It was pretty obvious that Gara, as he approached, that the blows to Torchwick's pride were effective. But I'll be running this town someday. Mark my words, he finished. According to Gara, this man was desperate to prove himself and did not like not being taken seriously. Junior seemed unconvinced. Of course you will. So what do you want? I want to hire your men. Now, Junior was all business. You know you have to have the cash in order to do that, he said, still skeptical about Roman's ambition. He had one psychopath under his employ, as he heard, very strong, but still ultimately one person, a criminal empire with wealth and connections he did not have. Roman didn't say anything, but just kept the same old shit-eating grin. Don't waste my time, kid. Whatever it is you're trying to pull, shouldn't you and that little psychopath of yours be enough for the job? Come back to hire my men when you got the money. Junior, is that how you treat an old family friend? Your father got me started in this business, and I wouldn't be where I am today without him. Now I'm just here asking his son for a little bit of aid. Is that too much to ask? Junior looked around. Fine, you can take him, no charge, and bring him back in one piece, he remarked, pointing at Gara, who didn't so much as react. Roman dampened significantly, his facade crumpling slightly. Really, Junior, you want to spring some funny-dressed kid on me and call it help? It's the best I can afford right now. Take it or leave it. My boys work hard enough around here as is, and many of them want to break out into a legitimate business venture. I can't ask them to do your dirty work for you without the proper reimbursement. Roman Torchwick scowled. Fine, but don't think you're hot shit like your father. You've grown soft, Junior. Xiaoyang Senior would have never done what you're doing today. Torchwick turned to Gara for the first time. All right, kid, your boss decided that you're going to be thrown into the fire by yourself. Just follow me and try not to get in the way. We've got a really important job we need to be doing. Gara didn't particularly care either way. It was unlikely that whatever this common thug wanted doing wasn't going to be the hardest mission he had ever undertaken. He turned to Junior, though, as if questioning his line of reasoning. Junior sighed and slicked back his hair. Just go with Roman, kid. I don't know what he wants you to do, but if you're as capable as you claim to be, then it shouldn't be much of a problem. Just watch your back. He can be difficult. So difficult that you getting him out of my hair for a while will earn you a fast track to a pay raise and the information you want. Gara stared at his boss before giving a curt nod. Even as Roman twirled his cane and barked at him to follow him, he felt a flare of annoyance as the flamboyant man did so. He could see why Junior found dealing with him difficult, but he began to follow anyway as Roman exited the bar with Gara in tow. Roman practically shoved the double doors to the club open as the two of them exited into the streets of Vale. When the door shut behind them and the music was drowned out, Roman turned to address Gara. Okay, listen, kid, I came to Junior since I thought he would help me in my biggest hour of need, but I guess I was wrong. I don't have the money or the power to pull a job like this off, but because of reasons I have to do it anyway, because I'm nothing without my assistant. That's why even if it's just going to be us, we're going to rob a dust store. Why would you need to rob a dust store? Roman tuttered. I guess I'm going to bring you along for the raid, so you'd need to know about that. See, I'm on the low end of the totem pole as a criminal in this town. I only started branching out on my own in about the last year. I have hardly any money, few followers, no syndicate, etc. What I do have going for me is my assistant, Neo. Her abilities have been a boon more often than not, and have allowed me to escape some nasty predicaments. When I became big time in this town, Neo will have surely played a huge part in that. Problem is, she's been captured when we were doing one of our rounds the other day. We must have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Neo was just captured by the local law enforcements. Then this wouldn't be nearly the problem it actually is. What do you mean? We were robbing a place when we ran into this girl who was part of one of the biggest noble families in Vale. There's a whole bunch of daughters. They're rather infamous for their combat abilities. She wasn't turned into the local law enforcements. She's no doubt being held within their manor, as this family has the political power to arrest and essentially try anyone they please, as long as they get the approval of Vale's government. So it's essentially a rescue mission. Why do you feel the need to rob the store if that's the case? Roman looked at him blankly. Well, my initial plan was just to load up on all the dust I can and rush in there guns blazing to take back my partner. How strong is this enemy? You called them one of the biggest noble families, infamous for their combat abilities. If this is a rescue mission, then using such force would be wasteful at best and suicidal at worst. Roman scowled and lurched forward, grabbing Gara's collar. Surprisingly, the Suna no Tate did not spring into action. It's all I've got. What would you suggest I do, huh? I came here to get some men, and instead all I ended up with was some punk kid. The least you can do is not give me lip and just follow my damn orders. Gar batted his hand away and glared at him, the cork on his gourd subconsciously loosening. Listen, you imbecile, I am only doing this because it is convenience for me. I don't care about your assistant, and I certainly don't care about your crime career. Your plan is reckless, idiotic, and horribly thought through. We can rob the stores and assault this. We can rob and solve the place, but you are the only one who is going to die. That seemed to do it for Roman, who hoisted melodic cudgel up and pointed the barrel point blank right in Gara's face. And just who do you think you are giving me orders, you little brat? The grass tilted the back of his neck, but he didn't feel like moving to correct the problem. He was staring up at the night sky in the middle of a field. For some reason, it didn't entirely feel like his body, nor his mind. It was almost like he was reliving an experience of another person, except not in control of his actions or able to change it. It was hard to explain. It was more than just looking through a window into their life. He was in this person, but he was not at the same time. He felt a certain connection to them, but he didn't understand why he was in a glassy field staring up at the night sky. The night sky is great here. It has all the same constellations as back home. Naruto's eyes weakly fluttered open to witness the misty morning. He tasted the swampy morning air as he opened his mouth, only to realize he was laying in the grass, but he wasn't looking at stars and was tucked in his sleeping bag. He was cut off from his thoughts by a rumbling noise that vibrated in his pocket. Naruto gave a short growl of annoyance. It was that damn device that he nicked from Clara again, probably from the Fall Woman. They were going to play phone tag at this rate, but in the wake of his little episode last night, he almost forgot he had called her. He had been sleeping with one eye open anyway, but managed to dream anyway. Strange dreams. Hadn't Han said something about that? And there weren't any grim attacks during the night, which was the first. He wouldn't count his blessings though. They'd probably be swarming on him at some point again soon. That was getting to be a huge pain in the ass. Apparently, all of the kingdoms had walls that kept Grim out, and there was another benefit that traveling to Mistral would bring. He sitting himself up and stretching before noticing that Arslan was sitting up in her own sleeping bag, wide awake next to her place by the dead fire. She had been pensive ever since their talk last night, and after he agreed to bring her to Mr. alongside Neptune, at least she didn't seem completely depressed anymore. But Naruto knew better to assume she had been she had even remotely gotten over all that had apparently recently. Ready to meet up with Neptune? Naruto asked. "Oh yeah, I guess I am," she said. It must have been hard for her to get excited. They were still a ways away from Mistral, but getting Neptune from the next village over was still first priority. Arslan did seem a little quieter though, and much more reserved. They packed up their things and cleaned up their campsite in silence. Naruto wanted to start up conversation, but fell silent every time Arslan looked at him. And to be honest, every time he looked at her, it stirred forth something, bad emotions that he would rather suppress for the time being. The journey was also silent. Grim attacked as usual as they got moving, putting an end to their little bit of peace the previous night. But Arslan seemed particularly uninterested in talking that morning as they took a detour away from the ruined village they had entered. They were headed down the southeast trail towards the village of Shina, and when they got there, thankfully, it hadn't been attacked by a group of wandering marauders. As far as villages existing between kingdoms, Shina was fairly nice. Unlike Katalihyuk, the people in the village seemed to be fairly well to do. The buildings actually had some archaeological structure. Basically, the village didn't look like a dump built into a hole that was ready to kill over at any given time. There was only one inn in the town, though, which made it easy to spot where Neptune was staying. They walked into the establishment and asked the innkeeper at the bar if a boy with blue hair was staying there. Someone like Neptune must have been hard to forget, so the innkeeper pointed out that he was and gave him the room number. The trip to Shina was a lot less eventful, but they decided to stay one more night in the village before heading out on the road the next day. The circus did pay Neptune a steady wage despite everything else, so that was the reason he was able to be comfortable was able to comfortably stay at the inn. But he didn't know if he had enough in savings to make the trip to Mistral completely, let alone what they would do when they got there. When Neptune had told them that, Naruto knew what he needed to be done. As Arslan and Neptune exited the room they were staying in and went downstairs to order something to eat, Naruto whipped out the scroll yet again and dialed the number. Naruto again took a deep breath as it rang, and an even deeper one when there came a click from the other side. "Hello," said a kind, matronly voice. Naruto didn't speak at first, finally speaking to the woman who had been such a mystery to him with the clapper affair. When he didn't say anything, and Tremaine continued on. Oh, Arthur, it's you. I've been trying to get a hold of you. Where have you been, good sir?" Naruto began to think things over. As much as he wanted to just expose Claver's crime to the world, he wondered if this woman would take that well, even if she did sound very kindly. Did she have the wool pulled over her eyes? Even if she did, he couldn't exactly prove anything over the phone. "Excuse me, is this Lady Tremaine Fall?" he asked in a pleasant voice, trying as hard as he could to put on a pleasant facade. "Who is this? What have you done with Otto?" she asked, and to Naruto's bewilderment, her voice sounded more scared than angry. Naruto gave a fake chuckle, almost unbelieving of what he was about to say. I'm just a humble employee borrowing his scroll. He'd let me use his personally to talk to you. He's a great boss. He cares so much about his employees that he let me do this when I told him my problems." The other line went silent, and though Naruto seemed to have gotten her attention. "I see. That would fit the description of what Otto is like, but I struggle to understand what problem you have that could be solved by talking to me. Me, my friend, and this girl we picked up from the neighboring village have been working at a circus. We're all orphans. We have no place to go. Clever offered us employment and a place to stay, but we're just kids. My friend in particular has a dream to attend a huntsman school, and so does the girl. Me, I could go either way. Our boss seems to understand that we'll have to leave this place eventually, and he figured that you were the best person to talk to about that." The other line fell silent again, but this time it seemed to be in contemplative thought. Well, it is true that I personally know Professor Lionheart as well as Professor Liddell at Sanctum Academy, but to be accepted into Sanctum, one would have to be young enough and display some combat aptitude. I've sponsored students there before, but I've absolutely refused to throw children who are not prepared into that lifestyle. The entrance exams are in several months. If you can make your way to Mistral and apply directly, I can judge your combat abilities in person and recommend you for the entrance exams. If you pass my personal test, I see several prospective students a year. Naruto felt his cheek break out into a smile, this time genuine. Thank you so much." "No problem, sweetie, and if you could tell Otto to answer his scroll sometimes, that would be wonderful." He's not here right now. If you've noticed, I'll give him that message for you. Bye. Naruto shouted, quick to hang up the scroll before Tremaine could get another word in. Now that he knew she saw many students a year and sponsored some, he was less concerned about calling favor with her through clever. He put the scroll down and back into his pocket, staring out the window in the room. He was grinning. He couldn't wait to tell Neptune and Arslan the good news. He doubted they could use Clever's name anymore, but at least they knew now that there was someone that any kid could directly go to. The door to their room opened again sometime later, and in walked both Arslan and Neptune, casually chatting to one another. They jumped when he rushed up to them with a megawatt grin and placing his hands around each of their shoulders. Good news, he said heartedly, clamping them both on the back. Arslan and Neptune looked at each other in confusion, though it didn't diminish Naruto's smile in the slightest. What are you so excited about? We're nowhere near, Mistral, Neptune asked, and Naruto produced the scroll he had been talking to Lady Fall with out of his pocket and showing it to the other two kids. Just got off a call with someone on this, he started explaining, pointing to his scroll. Real bigwig in Mistral who has a lot of connections. Said she would give the two of you a shot, and if you impress, she would pull some strings to get you inside that academy. Neptune and Arslan looked at each other, smiles splitting onto their faces, while they quite gasped of excitement. Naruto let go of the two of them, walking over to the bed and grabbed his backpack. Well, no time to waste. We've rested and eaten, and the chick who is expecting you will probably want to see you sooner or later. We better be going before something else happens, he said as he hoisted the backpack over his back. The other two kids gave enthusiastic nods before the two of them began scrambling to pick up their own items. As they did so, an article of clothing fell out of Neptune's pack. Naruto blinked, noticing the rich red leather the material seemed to be made out of. It looked expensive. Neptune, where did you get that? Oh, that? I bought it at one of the shops here in the town when I was waiting for the two of you to come, he said, while picking it up and dusting it off. It looks expensive, Naruto said. Well, like I said, it wasn't like Clever didn't pay us well while in the circus. Money-wise, I was definitely more well off than I was living on the street, just scraping up enough to get by. If I'm going to go become a huntsman, I have an image to keep up. I'm never gonna go back to the life I lived before. Ever. When people see me at Sanctum and later Haven, they're gonna see a cool guy, not one that grew up a street rat. Naruto pondered that for a moment. It sounded familiar to what he did while in the academy, that is pull pranks for attention. Once he found friends, he was able to show his real self and leave much of that behind. Perhaps Neptune would be able to do the same, but Naruto didn't say anything about it for it now. You coming, Naruto? Arslan asked, apparently having grabbed her own stuff while Naruto was lost in thought. There was another thing. There was the matter that in some time Arslan seemed to resent him. A lot had happened. They couldn't be expected to come free completely intact mentally. Neptune seemed desensitized to the whole thing from years of hardship growing up, and Arslan had retreated inward to become more reserved, but it was very obvious she was no longer emotionally stable. The three kids left the inn and got on the road again, thoughts swimming in Naruto's mind. Neptune's mindset over all of this was an issue, but not necessarily a groundbreaking one. Arslan, however, he hoped that her resentment did not fester because he didn't know what else he could do to make things right. End of chapter 12.